Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Amanda, and this is a vlog of my late diagnosed autism and ADHD journey. And today, a little bit of Amanda's Rambles video. I have a topic. I want to talk about what it's like to be autistic. Like, what is it like to be autistic? And it's a little hard to speak on this because of two reasons. One, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. We are all very unique and very different. We do share similar groups of traits. And sometimes, if someone has one trait of autism, the other autistic person might experience that same trait in a very opposite format. So that is kind of one thing to keep in mind. I'm only one person talking about autism. The other thing that makes it a little hard to talk about autism, like what it's like to be autistic, is that it's all I've ever known. I've always been autistic. I didn't get diagnosed until I was 42, so I didn't have words to understand the things that I experienced and felt. I thought everyone just went around feeling the same way, but there was kind of a disconnect because I also knew that I wasn't like anybody else. So it was very odd. But it is all I've ever known. I just didn't have a word for it, like I said. So a couple of things as I was like coming up with this video. For one thing, y'all know I like to be very authentic and transparent. I did film or try to film a video on this topic yesterday, and I was very dysregulated. And I haven't even watched it back, but I have a feeling like it just didn't seem like it was going well. It didn't feel like it was making much sense. I kept getting interrupted, and I wasn't able to pick up where I left off because my brain, I'm going through another round of burnout and experiencing brain fog. So when I go on tangents, it's harder for me to loop back than when I'm more regulated. So speaking on that, a lot of autism internally presenting is, I don't know if this is the science of it, but I forget exactly how it's classified. It's like a neurological disorder or a developmental disorder. Like sometimes I get those specifics mixed up, but I think a lot of it is a nervous system disorder because our nervous systems get very dysregulated because of the sensory things that we experience as autistic people. And when our nervous systems are dysregulated, our window of tolerance for sensory experiences gets very much smaller. When our nervous systems are regulated, then the window of tolerance can be bigger. That's why autism is a dynamic disorder, means it's not the same. Things that I don't bother me one day are completely unbearable for me another day. And so for friends and family, it doesn't make sense. Like, oh, well, you could do this last week or yesterday. Why can't you do it today? And it's because of that window of tolerance that changes depending on how my nervous system is doing, and things that can dysregulate can be wide and varied. And depending on what it is, it may take a lot longer to get back into a regulated flow or state, I think. And sometimes it's hard to identify what is even dysregulating an autistic person. It may not be obvious to the people around them or even to the autistic person themselves. Like, I'm learning so much more about autism after getting a diagnosis and being able to have language and talk to other autistic people. And yet I'm still struggling sometimes to identify what I'm feeling and why I'm dysregulated. So like I said, this last week I've been very dysregulated. I think a lot of it has to do with just being December. Gift giving, I've talked about it on the channel before, is something that I think I have a lot of trauma around, that I've started to talk to my therapist around. Um, my brain has a hard time even thinking about that. How can gifts giving and receiving be so traumatic? But our brains we don't get to choose what our trauma's around. So to go back to some of the what's it like to be autistic, some of the things that I've thought about since filming yesterday. It's little things like when I lay my head down on my pillow, I have to pull all my hair up off my neck. I cannot have my hair touching my neck when I'm trying to sleep. And sometimes it takes a while for me to get in the perfect position to sleep because I have to have my nightgown situated in an exact specific way on my body. I can't have my hair. Sometimes I can sleep with my hair in a loose ponytail on top of my head, which is nice because then it will stay up off my neck. But other times that is too much tension or feeling. It doesn't work. Like some nights it works, some nights it doesn't. Again, like I said, dynamic, right? Something that I've done ever since I was a little kid and now I see is related to autism is I don't like the sensation of skin on skin. So I've always worn, like if I wear skirts, I've always worn like bike shorts under my skirts. And I've always slept in some kind of pajama pants because I don't like my thighs touching. I like to wear a bra because I don't like the feeling of my breast tissue on, like touching. Like the bra helps keeps things separate. There's just different areas of the body like that. So I've always slept in PJ pants, but I cannot stand my pajama pants riding up my leg. Like it would wake me up. I also like to have socks on. Like a lot of autistic people absolutely cannot stand socks. But my feet feel too much sensory input if I don't have them wrapped up tightly with socks. What I started doing at a very young age was I would take whatever pants that I was sleeping in and tuck them into my socks. And I knew at a young age this was not normal and looked weird, but it was the only way I could sleep. So a lot of times, like if I was at camp or a sleepover, when everybody was like settled for the night, I would reach down under the covers and quickly tuck my socks into my pants into my socks. And like if I got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, I would untuck them in case somebody saw me, and then I would tuck them back in. And just because, again, masked behavior, I was trying to appear normal, and I knew that looked weird. It wasn't a fashion trend. It was like weird. So this is, one of those things, like what's it like to be autistic is having sensory things that you're just constantly always trying to avoid. In the kitchen, this one's kind of interesting because I had an identity. One of my early special interests was cooking. And so a lot of my identity was wrapped up in the fact that I love to cook. And since hitting burnout, I've been really struggling in the kitchen. I mentioned it a little bit here and there on the channel. I don't know if I've made a full video on it. Again, I have a memory disorder, so I honestly don't remember if I've gone into depth. I think part of it's because it's hard for me to talk about because getting the autism diagnosis changed my entire life, but it also struggling in the kitchen, it's like it took away a huge part of how I identify with who I am. And I think there was a lot of dissociation that happened around some sensory stuff. So I think when you're autistic, you take in so much sensory information, but at some point, especially when you're masking, if it's too much, your body just and your brain just dissociates from it. So in the kitchen, when I'm cooking with raw chicken now, it makes it where I don't want to eat the chicken after I've cooked it. Like touching the raw chicken um, is such a sensory ick for me. But I'm also have executive functioning disorder, so putting on the gloves, which would help, is like an other step, which makes it hard to just even want to do it at all. Um, and I'm constantly washing my hands. I've done that all the time. Like, and I thought it was just being extra sanitary, but I'm washing my hands because it's like if I touch anything, like if I get salt on my fingertips, it's like I got to get it off my fingers. Like I don't like stuff on my fingers, my hands. If I touch oil or butter, it's like I've got to get it all the way off. So I'm constantly washing my hands while I'm cooking. But I hate having wet hands, so then I'm drying them, and it just makes it struggle. um, what are some other things? Like, what's it like to be autistic? What it's like to be autistic is when you walk into a restaurant. It's always been very overwhelming. I love going out to eat. I think that's again, it's one of those things that I thought was part of my personality, like food and cooking and dining out. But I also didn't realize how much I really just check out when I'm in a restaurant. Walk in, the smells, the lights, the sounds. Restaurants are very sensory places. And so I would get what I call tunnel vision. And I know I've done this again before I was even diagnosed. Something I've always done. And I just thought it was being focused. And then when I'm with a friend, I thought it was like showing how much attention I wanted to be with my friend. So, like, if I was meeting her restaurant, I basically tune out the entire environment and I'm like hyper focused on my friend. But now I realize it was because it's like I had to use part of my brain to actively tune out my environment so I could hear and pay attention to what my friend was saying. And that takes up so much brain power that you don't even realize. And it can put you in dangerous situations because I would tune out my environment in places that I should be aware of my environment, especially, as a female. Um, my neck is really stiff today. Um, what's it like to be autistic? It's hearing the electricity in the walls. Sometimes when I'm dysregulated and my window of tolerance is low, I can hear the electricity. I can hear the light bulbs. When I have a higher window of tolerance, then these things I don't pay attention to as much. But for instance, I have a clock in my office that is ticking, and it's like I'm always aware of it. My brain doesn't tune out the snoring dog at my feet, the clock on the wall, but I have to use some brain power to try to turn that off consciously. Like a neurotypical person's brain just filters this kind of thing, but I have to just like ignore the clock, focus on your words. And so it takes a lot of effort to do these things. So, what's it like to be autistic? It's never knowing if you understood the joke. You don't know if somebody was joking, if they were being sarcastic. And it's not like every once in a while. I'm sure, an allistic person is like, wait, are you joking? Occasionally. But for an autistic person, it's a common experience. And I'm looking around using context clues and body language and trying to understand if someone is joking or not, because I have a hard time reading body language and of one singular person and or tone. Um, but like I can kind of like read the room a little bit better sometimes, not always, especially when an entire room is in on something. Sometimes being autistic is having a social interaction and not being aware that the things that you're saying aren't landing right. And so you're just trudging along thinking everything's okay when the other person is actually upset with you, but not communicating that verbally. So you don't know until much later. because they were trying to be polite, but then they ghost you because they were actually really upset. What's it like to be autistic? It's when you don't understand things that autistic people take for granted, like social norms, but you do see complex patterns in social constructs. And you are like, why are people not handling this social construct? Why are we still doing this? Like, I've got some videos on social constructs. I'm not going to go into details, but um, we see big patterns and we see, why are we doing things as a species that are harmful to the species, and we can see the patterns, but then we miss what an allistic person thinks is an obvious social cue. Like, we miss what's obvious to allistic people, but they miss what's obvious to us. And last, I could probably come up with more too, but for this video, what's it like to be autistic? For me, it was always having friends and acquaintances, but never having a friend. It's being very, very alone in a crowd. It's everyone being kind to me and liking me, but no one wanting to spend one-on-one best friend time with me. That's changing in later years as I learn about my neurodivergence. But growing up, I was always friendly with everybody. I used to think that I was friends with everybody at school. Everyone liked me. But I also didn't realize that they were making fun of me behind my back. And I was never the one picked for anything. I would go home and I would cry. And I would say I didn't have any friends. And my mom, who was also undiagnosed autistic, she's like, well, that's just how life is, because it was the same for her. Anyway, I hope this video you found informative. I'm going to add it to the friends and family video, so feel free to share it with people if you relate to my experience and sometimes have a hard time putting words to some of the things you're feeling. Until the next one, bye.